Now, am I audible?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right, cool. Sorry for that. So, without any further delays, you can just text US in the chat space, and then I'll text you. I will take you. So I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. There are two ways by which I'm going to interrogate this debate. First of all, I'm going to interrogate it based on what is best for the Republican Party, and secondly, I'm going to interrogate it on what is best for the American people. First, let's interrogate the Republican Party. Mitt Romney seriously considered running for the Republican nomination in the 2016 presidential election and initially explored the possibility. However, he announced in January 2015 that he would not be seeking for presidency in 2016. There were several reasons for this, and this is very important as a form of context. First, he cited that the time of the decision and the impact it would have on his family. Running for president is a demanding endeavor that requires a significant time commitment, and he expressed concern about the toll it could take on his loved ones, considering the fact that he had lost significantly to Obama in the 2012 elections, which really disenfranchised him or caused him to step away. But secondly, his decision also aimed at promoting party unity. By stepping aside, he may have believed it would help the Republican Party to coalesce around the different candidates without the internal decisions that could arise from a contested primary involving a prominent figure like himself, because it was deemed like he should be the most uncontested candidate within the party as well. So he stepped outside to allow people like Hillary Clinton to come into the question. The last thing then is that he accessed the political landscape in the field of potential Republican candidates. At that time, he might have believed that other candidates could have better represented the party's interests or had a stronger chance of winning the presidency. And that's why he stepped aside candidates like Trump to be able to opt into that particular ideology, right? It means that because he opted out of this, significantly gave an ability for Trumpism to rise in a virtual winning of Trump within the 2020, was it 2040, whatever the elections that he won in that particular regard. This is very much important because it tells you as to what happened that made him step aside and what impact had on the party and the nation as a whole when he stepped aside. How has this negatively affected the party? Notice that swing states like Florida, Ohio, and Michigan hated the rise of Trumpism and voted against it significantly in the past elections. I'm going to give you an analysis as to why this is true. Current statistics even prove that they still hate this ideology, coupled with the current brouhaha with Trump, with extortion and all those things that is happening with him in court, and the mere fact that he's not even been allowed to contest in certain states, even as the candidate in these elections. As a party needs these swing states to be able to win the general elections, their head towards Trumpism becoming uproar then impedes the success of this party, which we think that it necessarily affects the ability to hold power within the United States of America. And that's why we preferred a world where he rather should have been able to continue his perpetuance of this particular ideology as opposed to Trump. But then, why don't these swing states like Trump in the first place? We think a couple of reasons. Trump usually appeals to suburban voters and the challenges faced by Donald Trump in certain demographics during his 2022 presidential elections, which were significant factors to why he lost in those swing states. So first of all, his suburban areas often include a wide range of diverse voters, including professionals, families, and individuals with varying economic backgrounds. Trump faced challenges in navigating this diversity and addressing the different concerns within suburban communities due to his diverse personality and his inability to reach most of these people in those particular suburbs. But secondly, those suburb women emerged as crucial voting bloc, and their preferences were a focal point in 2022 election. Trump simply did not care. Issues like healthcare, education, and the overall tone of political discourse resonated strongly with the suburban women, and Trump messages were simply not focusing on these things. So you realize that Joe Biden was able to win by actively perpetuating on Obama's healthcare policy that was launched that helped him to win on the elections. But lastly, the suburban areas have often higher concentrations of educated voters. Trump encountered challenges in appealing to this democratic group with some reserved expressions about how he approaches certain issues and his intellectualism, even on an international front, which made it difficult for most of these states to vote for him. The last thing here is on the cultural issues and the tone of most of these issues. The tone of Trump's rhetoric, particularly on issues related to race, immigration, and diversity political discourse, became a factor for some voters. Some expressed discomfort with the perceived divisiveness and sought candidates who emphasized unity and a more inclusive approach, something Trump did not have. Women in this workforce, a significant portion of these suburban demographics, were attentive to economic policies, workplace equality, family-oriented issues. Trump policies and messages in these areas were subject to scrutiny and influenced voting. Clearly, he couldn't capture these groups, which made him lose elections, and that's why the party is suffering currently. But last thing is on his personality. Voters often access candidates based on their perceived character and leadership qualities. Personal style, communication, and an overall tone of candidates' messaging can influence the voters' choices. Of course, he's not the best fit when it comes to these things, and that's the reason why they voted against him in that particular regard. Before I move, I'm going to take a PY from open opposition.
First of all, you are deviating. The motion is not about Trump. But secondly, according to you, Romney stepped down because he cared about his family. So even if he won, what shows that for the second tenure, he wouldn't step
First of
down?
all, I'm trying to prove that the reason why the party is suffering is because of Trump. The reason why Trump is in there is because Romney stepped down. Get the linkage and don't talk about deviation. And secondly, he stepped down for his family because he had consistently lost. And in the 20th election, he lost woefully. He was thinking about his mental, social, and all those things. If he had won, that is the world which we are preferring, then he would have been able to portray that particular discourse, that particular regard. This is not a relevant POI in your case. Why was Rumi then a better candidate as opposed to what we have in current status quo? Temperament and demeanor. Rumi was very often perceived as having a more traditional and measured demeanor compared to Trump. Some voters valued what they saw as a statesman and calm approach, which means that on a comparative, if you compare him to Trump, most of these swing states are more likely to go in for Rumi as opposed to Trump, which is a determining factor to cause them to win their previous elections. But secondly, Rumi had a long history of political involvement, including serving as the governor of Massachusetts and running for presidential elections in 2012. Some voters have seen his political experience as a positive factor and were willing to vote for him in that particular regard. So even if that's what's influencing voter decision, and there's some that could have really perceived him as the best candidate as opposed to Trump. But lastly, voters who prioritize traditional conservative values, Rumi's stances on social issues and more conventional political background have aligned much more with these people, which caused them to have that particular ideology consistency with Rumi and would want to vote for him in that particular regard. Individuals who have specific policy disagreements with Trump have seen Rumi as a more aligned candidate on certain issues, whether it's been on trade, foreign policy, or other matters that even arises. Even in terms of personal conduct, voters were concerned about Trump's personal conduct, including all his rhetorics and diverse nature. On the other hand, Rumi was seen by having a more reserved and disciplined personal demeanor. The impact here is quite intuitive. Then it means that it is quite easy to buy into his ideologies as Rumi, and these swing states are more likely to vote for Rumi as opposed to Trump. So in a world where Rumi won the election, it is easier for Rumi to win the election on two conservative bases, as opposed to a world where Trump won one and lost the other one to the Democrats Party. So what I have done in my first speech is to prove to you how Rumi stepping down has significantly impacted the Republican Party and caused them to lose an election that they were not supposed to lose due to the ideology of Trumpism in that particular regard. In my second speech, I'm going to explain to you how necessarily we preferring Rumi's candidature or winning the election would have been better for the people of America. For all these reasons, vote opening government.
Okay, thanks, PM. Just give me a second before I call the leader of the Okay, leader of the opposition, ready when you are.
Am I audible? Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, awesome. PO is in the chat. If I don't take you and I'm running out of time, you can then unmute and then you can say it verbally. So if I'm still audible, I'm going to start pretty soon. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to start in 3, 2, 1. I'm going to take out opening government, right? Because I think they've missed today's motion. First of all, it's a preferred motion. So if they prefer a world where Romney had won, a sensible GAF team would then go ahead to talk to us about exactly how America would have looked like from 2012 to 2016 under Romney and why that would have been better than what we saw under Obama from 2012 from 2016. Because you get none of that from Prime Minister. All he said was Romney looked cool, he was the better candidate, would have been nice if he won. Like if he had won from OG, how would that have looked like? We get to no comparative. The second thing OG then did, which is wrong, was to assert that if Romney won in 2012, then subsequently the Republican Party would have won again in 2020, and then they would have gotten a double tenure because when Trump came, Trump only won just one term, and then the second term he lost out again to somebody else. I don't know how we can make that assertion in today's debate because he gives you no concrete analysis to show that if Romney won in 2012, subsequently in 2016, Romney would have won again to give the Republican Party a double tenure because things would have changed around then. People then just basically preferred to have this guy Biden to then rule them, right? But he says two other things. That the first thing he said was that Trump was bad and blah blah blah. He lost the elections. He didn't care about suburban citizens. I'm going to go out there and say this before the closing team say it. This debate is not about Trump, and I cannot argue whether Trump was a good guy or a bad guy because we can prove that a lot of the Republican Party members actually love Trump. The whole reason why you have MAGA, Make America Great Again, people storming the Capitol upon Trump's word, is because he has this big cult of personality. No GAF team can simply assert when Romney lost that next time Trump came and Trump is a bad guy. The debate cannot be about that. Cool. What are we going to do from opening opposition to win today's debates then? We're going to talk about two things. The first one is that we prefer that Obama won because policy-wise, it was better for Obama to just have a second tenure to continue what he had already done in the first tenure. And the second thing we're going to talk to you about is basically that Obama represented a new dawn for minorities in America and all over the world. And him winning the 2012 election and giving himself a second tenure cemented that legacy. Let's get to work. Let's talk about the first one. We think policy-wise, right? Going into the 2012 elections, it was simply better for Obama to have won, right? Here's why. The Romney and the Republican Party coming into the 2012 election had two big flagship policies. They said that they wanted to reappeal the Obamacare Act that Obama did in 2008, and they're going to replace it with other private insurance companies that would then take up healthcare. The second policy they had was that they would cut down on government spending on social security and welfare checks because the government was going down in a lot of debt in that regard, and they needed to send that money to fund militarization and the military industrial complexes because we're fighting wars with Yemen and Afghanistan. What were the two policies Obama then brought up, right? Obama had two flagship policies. He said that he was going to extend unemployment benefits, and then he was going to cut down on payroll taxes, and he would create the American Job Act to promote more jobs. Comparatively, why do we think it was better for America in 2012 to have Obama continuing to lead them? This is because the effect of the 2008 recession that Obama was trying to mitigate in his first tenure wasn't completely overdone yet, and you needed somebody who had already started the job to finish it. Here is why. When the 2008 recession hit, a lot of people lost their homes, they lost their houses, jobs were folding, so they were laying off people. That means people weren't getting work to even, get some kind of monthly returns and salary to say we can afford to live reasonably. What then that created was a responsibility upon the government to spend socially. So, for example, Obama had to do a lot of unemployment checks, a lot of welfare checks, and he had to introduce something called Obamacare, which basically said that even if you are poor and you have no health insurance, when you go to the hospital, if you can prove you're poor enough, the states will take up your medical bills and pay it, which was something really, really huge. The policy that Romney was proposing was to say that no, the state would not pay for you any longer. We will give your health insurance to a private company, and then they will assess you, and then they would give you insurance if they deem fit. The problem with that would have been that minorities and people that were unemployed and were poor, who didn't have any sort of income, weren't going to benefit from these policies. So we're going to see a very huge degradation in the quality of health of American citizens and what have you, right? The second thing is also about rejuvenating the American economy, right? Obama's policy about, helping people get houses and get better jobs is so crucial for the American economy, because the American economy is based on a lot of labor inflows coming in from other countries, a lot of immigrants and whatnot, right? What that meant was that you needed a democratic candidate who had relaxed labor laws and labor policy to make people get job much more easier so they can work to boost the economy post the 2008 crisis. What Romney would have done, because it was his policy literally, and I told you, right, that's like a fact, was that he said he was going to cut down, was going to actually increase corporate taxes so that they can get a lot of money. That basically means that if businesses are running at a loss because they are paying too much taxes, they're not going to hire a lot of people. So basically, this is not an assertion. It's the guy's policies that we're saying would have implemented. So at the very best of Romney's and Republican Party's implementation, they would have hurt America's ability to recover fully from the 2008 crisis. Hence, it was better for Obama to get the second tenure to fix it. And we think we saw largely that America was able to fix that, and they were ready enough for the 2020, like COVID when it hit, and they were really that good enough. Let's talk about the second case we're running from OO then. The second case is to talk about how Obama represented a new dawn for minorities, and the second tenure cemented that. Obama was the first Black American president of the United States, but people contested that, saying his first tenure was simply by luck, right? But he winning the second tenure proved that a Black American is indeed fit enough to lead this country for the first time, and they loved him enough to vote for him for the second time. What that then did was that it signaled to Black Americans in America and even all across the world that Black excellence is a thing of value. If you put your mind to it, you can get it. He wasn't kicked out of office by the next Republican white guy, right? It basically means the guy left on his own terms. But even more so, why it's suitable for minority communities was that Obama legalized LGBTQ marriage in June 2015. That is something he couldn't have done if he didn't get his second tenure. On the very contrast, right? Mitt Romney is a conservative guy who literally openly said he thinks same-sex marriages are an abomination. And the prime minister said this. He said that the Republican guys love him because he's a conservative and he's a cool guy who is in line with Republican values. Those guys do not like same-sex marriages. We think we prefer a world where Obama came and legalized same-sex marriages, right? He sped it up. They cannot assert that, oh, maybe some Republican guy could have also done same. At least we like it that Obama did it better in 2012. Vote opening opposition. Here.
Thanks, leader of Pop. DPM, when you're ready. DPM? Yeah, I can hear you.
Just to confirm, am I audible? I can't hear anyone.
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, cool. Sure. So I'm restarting my speech in 3, 2, 1. I think it's quite simple, and I want this to be very, very simple for everyone to understand. In the first speech, what happened on our speech was quite simple, which is to prove how the Republican Party has been affected. The lazy approach from opening opposition is to say, well, let's not make it about Trump, but let's just look at the United Nations or the people of the US as a whole. I think I'm going to engage that particular comparative. It's going to be side by side comparative, like what he does in his speech. But what I do in my speech in the first one is I'm able to effectively prove to you that the rise of Trumpism has created a negative perception or image on the Republican Party. Insofar as we are preferring, it means I want to prefer a world where the Republican Party is better compared to what is happening in current status quo. In status quo, there's huge division regarding the extent or even how Trump can compete in certain Republican states. It has become incredibly difficult due to his association with certain things like tax evasion and all those things that is causing certain states to ban him from even being on the ballot. Thanks be to God, he has been able to win certain states and have his name on the ballot. But this kind of reputation destruction is one that voters take into consideration, especially swing states, when it comes to determine who their next leader should be. It means that because Romeo stepped down, it made it easy for Trump to rise. The negative repercussions that have been associated with Trump is what we are seeing in current status quo, which looks like something that is causing people to pursue him and making it difficult for even the Republican primaries to come on smoothly as expected. It means that in a world where we prefer Romeo, who had won the election, it looked like a world where he constantly should have been the only candidate who was going to challenge Biden in the best case scenario in this particular regard. What it therefore means is that you have much more cohesion among the Republican Party as opposed to what is currently happening now because of the huge brouhaha that exists in status quo. This is why our first speech is important, because then it shows you the kind of threat that faces the Republican Party in the world of opposition. That's the world that they are preferring. Let's switch to that world. Then, how does the comparative look like? What is the comparative that people are now really trying to show to you? I'm going to indicate this when I'm comparing Romy, and I'm going to compare Obama in that particular regard. So first, on economic policy, notice that what Romy did was advocated for reducing taxation, particularly for high-income earners, with a goal of stimulating economic growth. So what that was supposed to happen was that insofar as they are able to reduce the kind of taxation that exists for these companies are therefore then incentivized into employ much more people to be able to give them the minimum amount of wages that is important. In Obama's governance, there was significantly high increments of taxation compared to what Romy was actually advocating for. This led to companies trying to fall off or leave a lot of these workers or trying to lay them off because they wanted to survive or because the taxations were just so huge for them to be able to advocate or help them, all of them, in that particular regard. What it therefore means is that, on the other hand, Obama favored a more progressive taxation, which included higher taxes for most of these corporations, which made it difficult for us to address the income inequality, which contributed to the social funding of most of these programs that existed in the United States. So if you want to talk about this on an economic level, you realize that Romney's policies were policies that were much favorable to the minorities that open opposition wants to defend, as opposed to what he wants you to believe happening in their world. Secondly, let's interrogate the idea of healthcare. What he says is, well, healthcare is like such that Obamacare has made everything good. This is the problem with Obamacare. It makes it incredibly difficult for you to have care if you don't have things like an already existing insurance system. What Romy did was he favored a more state-driven approach to healthcare reform, emphasizes on market-based solutions. So what this approach was believed to do was to offer much more flexibility and reduce federal government's involvement. In Obamacare, there's huge healthcare coverage and protection of individuals with pre-existing conditions that most of these individuals cannot meet in that particular regard. Most people argue that it has significant strides in addressing the issue of the insured, but the uninsured necessarily do not really have access to this system because in most instances, the kind of pre-existing conditions that you needed to meet before you had Obamacare was what made it difficult for most of these particular marginalized groups to be able to access in that particular regard. And that's the reason why even on healthcare or Obamacare that they want you to believe, we still beat them on that particular idea. Now let's look at regulation and business. What Romy did was to emphasize on reducing regulatory burdens on businesses to spur economic growth. He argued that fewer regulations could encourage businesses to create much more expansion and job creation for most of these people that do not have access to it. Obama sought to strengthen regulations, particularly in the financial sector, to prevent the 2008 financial crisis. What they did was it increased oversight and made it difficult for most of these corporations to be able to employ much more people, because now there's so much scrutiny that was associated with Obama's kind of administration, which also made it difficult for people to have access to the labor market system. And that's why, even in that particular comparative, you realize that the preference of Romney's administration would have been better than what we had in Obama's administration. And the last thing here then is, let's look at then foreign policy. What Romney took was a more assertive stance on policy making, which was expressing concerns about Russia and advocating for a tougher approach in the Middle East. What Obama did was to weaken the already established things. The already established Afghanistan Taliban rule. That made it difficult for US to actually maintain support that particular within that particular territory. What Romney did was to encourage a much more robust foreign policy that would encourage national security, and that's what Trump, even in that particular regard, tried or wanted to also follow. Obama, on the other hand, was characterized by focusing on multilateralism and diplomatic engagement, which woefully failed in most instances. And that's the reason why it led to a huge uproar of China being able to overtake them in certain trade industries and being able to restrict them in how they even operate within the market in China. Exploitation were much more common in the administration of Obama, because the regulations were much less tighter as opposed to regulations that really wanted to advocate, and that's the regulations that usually exist within the confines of a Republican Party. Out of order. What this therefore means is that if you compare them even side by side on all these policies, it is incredibly easier to know that in Romney's administration, difference gives us is that it gives you an idea of what are we open government. First of all, how then are we able to ensure stability of a Republican Party insofar as it's currently being deteriorated? But secondly, if he had won that particular election, how the American people would have been able to access these spaces is one that we are actively able to interrogate in our speech. For all these reasons, vote open government. Here.
Okay, thanks, DPM. DLO, when you're ready. Yeah, I can hear you.
Right. So I'll be taking POIs in the text space. If you have a POI, please shoot. I would prioritize closing governments. I would really want them to ask me a POI just so that we can preemptively engage the closing half of this debate. Great. Yeah, I'm coming, please. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2. Hey, sorry. My time. Yeah. Great. I'm starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. I think my partner already does a lot in terms of responding to opening government, and I am going to aggressively engage them just so you understand why opening government can't win this debate. And I pretty beg closing. Opening government have one case, and that is that the second tenure of that is their basic idea. If Mitt had won, then it means Trump prefer that particular world. We prefer a world where Mitt Romney had won the 2012 US presidential election. I'm going to respond in 3 ways to this. The first response is, let's be realistic. The Trump, even after we had seen Obama complete his full tenure. So the argument here looks very ridiculous from government bench, because Trump came after Obama lost after Obama went out of office in 2017. The question is, do we really agree that Trump would not have come if Mitt Romney had won in 2012? Do we think that Trump would not have pursued the same, like come with the same Trumpism narrative? I think that's very ridiculous, because the problem is, even if we try to be as engaging as possible, there is no substantial proof to show that we can agree that Trumpism would not have been a thing the way opening government wants you to agree. We think it's highly speculative of them, and most of the arguments they give are just based off of assertions, right? The reason why this is problematic is that in a prefer motions, you're probably looking on comparing two words. We agree that because government's word is unrealistic because it never happened, then they can make a lot of assertions on what their word would have looked like. We think even if they can make those assertions need to be realistic. We need to be able to look into those assertions and say, yes, that is something that would probably not have happened this way. We don't think it's fair for them to just make basic speculations based off of ridiculous ideas that they support. The second thing to say here is, even if we agree that Trumpism had been so much of a problem, the way these guys want you to agree with them, we think that there are a few things you cannot ignore in debates about politics. Two things here. One, politics is never a game of personal beliefs or individual values. So we cannot just go on with you to agree that Mitt Romney would have been a better personality, or because we know he's taking care of his wife and his family in decent ways, then we can agree that he will take care of the American people in that same way. We think it's very ridiculous, because in the same way you can fiat such arguments, we can also say the same thing on opposition. The second thing to say is that democracy, because it is premised on majority rule, does not mean that majority is always right. However, because we agree that people have different opinions and different beliefs, we needed a way to sieve out which belief needs to be agreed upon to be a universal, like agreement on that particular level. That is why we can also argue that is why we can't also argue that the political views and beliefs that opening government talks about in themselves are absolute. We don't think it's okay for you to just insert those claims. You need to be able to prove, one, that Mitt Romney and the political identity to which he had is something that could have inferred in any way any kind of benefit on our side. I don't think that it's okay for you to do such arguments like and run off telling us, oh, Mitt Romney would have changed this or would not have changed the other things. The third thing to say here is, this debate is just about Mitt Romney winning the election in 2012, which means that Obama's regime would have cut short, right? Because Obama came into office in 2009. 2012 was just 3 years into office. The problem is, we cannot agree with most of their claims because the American people had already seen Obama in action for 3 years. And they were able to trust him, to give him the mandate to take them for another year, even if you can come and tell us about a lot of issues that the Trump administration had. I mean, we can't come here to talk about how ridiculous the American voting system would have been, or whether it or not it was rigged to favor Mitt Romney. There are just a lot of speculations with opening government claim, and we cannot buy those arguments of those analysis. We think closing government deserves to do better in terms of giving us tangible things to hold on. In lieu of that same speculation, we cannot win. This debate cannot be won based off of imagining what Mitt Romney would have done, or imagine what Obama should not have done to make things better. This is a prefer motion. It means teams need to be very comparative. There's no comparison in government's bench to what exactly the Obama care did, what Obama regime did, which my partner did show you. Let's talk about our case. So what do you get from my partner? The first thing is, my partner does a good job in establishing policy-wise why Mitt Romney administration would not have stood a chance, and why we are not more likely going to buy it. If that's closing government acting a POI, they can shoot. closing government should.
Moving out of an economic crisis.
Great. That's good, and that's true. We can guarantee that. But we
Mascot, I can't hear you anymore. Mascot. Yeah. Now I can hear you. We couldn't hear anything that you said.
my Wi-Fi disconnected. That was why.
20 seconds. So I'll set the timer back to 1 minute 20 seconds. I was just like after the POI. So just go back to the response of the POI.
Okay, perfect. So resuming my speech in 3, 2, 1. So we agree that we can make speculations about Mitt Romney either making better policies because of the fact that he was Republican and what he supported. The response is the Obama administration, even with what they did not collapse the United States economy. So we can't even say that things got so bad the way you want us to believe, and thus you can't make so much of a claim outside it, right? But more importantly, it was more likely that the policies that Romney would have done, things like reducing those corporate taxes, they would more likely have been favorable to only a few persons in the United States. More importantly, let's talk about the more realistic part of this debate. While we can make a lot of speculations about Romney and Obama in this debate, one thing we know for sure is that Obama was the first ever Black American president. Why do we think this brand identity was something that was very crucial for the United States at that particular point, which also set up a foundation for making things better in terms of racial injustice that the US had always been claimed to be guilty of? Three things here. One, within 3 years in power would not have given that level of legitimacy, which the African, we don't think that was so much of a time. We think the fact that Trump won like in 2012 again gave so in that particular framework. We think at that particular point in time, it was good for the United, like liberation for them, because there were better like communication and relationship with African countries into those policies. You need to be able to prove why on a comparative it is better. Proud to oppose. I'm sorry. Oh.
Thanks, Jill. Or to open closing, member of government. Yeah, I can hear you.
Perfect. 2, 1. The opposition side of today's in power after the 2012 election is actively going to improve the economy. They lose this debate because that is the most important argument that we need to engage with in today's debate. 3 key problems that we've identified. Extend that as much as we can. Second, the idea of economic reform following the 2008 recession. And thirdly, the idea that hasn't been engaged with and is going to be important. What is our stance then in today's debate? We'd much rather have these policies, or the policies that we can guarantee would be pushed by Mitt Romney, instead of the policies that were actively engaged with by Obama during the 2012-2016 term. We think a key point of characterization here is that this does happen from side opposition about how they're going to achieve liberation for specific individuals and how they're actively going to improve the lives of, for example, Black people. They don't provide a sufficient analysis as to why having a Black figurehead of a like Democrat Party minority within society. But we think that even if that was the case, we don't think we dealt with at that moment. We think that the lack of healthcare and the lack of economic security of individuals within America, including the Black minority, is present in before they recognize themselves as like established and legitimate. Now we need to deal with this substantive matter. We need to deal with some rebuttal from the 2 opening halves. Firstly, we get the idea of opening gov, and we think we get the idea from opening gov at getting votes. We recognize and that this may be likely, but we don't think that this is what the debate ought to be about. This debate, Republican Party, we think it should be what is in the best interest of individuals. Whether or not the Republican Party is with such importance, instead we should focus more on the material benefits that we can get and that I'm going to prove to you. We get from the opposition case. Firstly, a lot of characters like the idea that Mitt Romney wanted to increase taxation within these areas because that was some part of his Republican candidate. He moves into those positions to decrease taxes from side opposition is real. The second thing was the idea of how we have already dealt with. They don't prove that that's the case, and we actually don't care when the crisis is severe as it is. Onto the first substantive is a vertical extension on how one of the key goals and values of Mitt Romney's campaign case was the idea of creating a full Romney care. This is fundamentally important because if Romney were to have gotten to power, he would have likely advanced and would almost guaranteed to advance his own personal Romney care. This is important for 2 main reasons. Firstly, when you advance health care from the perspective of a Republican, you get more Republican buy-in because individuals who are Republicans is now pushing healthcare under the leadership of a Republican, they're more likely to buy into that policy. Fundamentally important for the longevity of healthcare throughout society is that Romney and the Romney care would likely have been less opposed by future Republican presidencies. This looks like when Donald Trump or any other Republican candidate coming into the power in the future, not stripping away Romney care like Trump did after he came in after Obama. As soon as Obama created Obamacare, Trump came in next and completely demolished it. If it instead had been established and had been called Romney Care, we likely wouldn't have had that direct opposition from other Republican candidates. What does this mean for individuals living today in America? What you then get over the long term is better development of this kind of healthcare, which is fundamentally important and has 2 main impacts. Before I get onto that, I'll take a POI.
Yeah, here's a POI. Look, your world is basically a cyclical world because after Romney also gets out, Biden came in and he also would have canceled Romney Care. But we concede that Obama spent a lot of state money on social welfare. We think it was justified because the minorities needed it.
So firstly, we think that as a Republican candidate, he spends significantly less on social welfare than other Democrat candidates. But secondly, healthcare is almost inherently a Democrat issue. When Biden were to come in next after Romney, he isn't going to dismantle Romney care because he also ran on the idea of providing healthcare. And when you destroy a healthcare mechanism, you're actively going against your party's values. We think that is something that's more bipartisan. I'm going to tell you, and I've already referenced the impacts, and we get better long-term healthcare for everybody that exists. Secondly, we don't think that we get enough engagement on how exactly Republicans are actively able to promote job security and financial security following the 2008 financial crisis, right? We think that because of like counter-fiscal monetary policy, right, what you actively do as a Republican is you lessen taxes, you increase government spending so that you can help the economy get out of these booms, right? We think that it is almost exclusively the Republican policy, the Republican Party who engages in these policies. And even if the Democratic Party does it, they don't do it to the extent that Republicans do. That means that coming out of the 2008 financial crisis, you're likely to get better job security, better financial security, and better and more effective policies in the long term because these Republicans are decreasing taxes, they're increasing government spending, and promoting economic growth. The last thing that we wanted to chat about was the idea of security. We think the panel, in the context, it is only the Republican Party who mandated widespread security for individuals, the right to bear arms, the right to actively maintain security of themselves. For these reasons, incredibly proud to propose.
Thank you, member of government. Member of opposition, when you're ready. Yes.
I'm all right now. Just to confirm again, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Okay. So starting my speech. I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Okay. Okay. So first thing, right? TG tries to start their case with saying that they want material benefits and go on to prove why they get some kind of material benefit. We are going to provide better benefits, like in our world where Obama actually won, right? So first thing on the importance of how the minorities, like specifically LGBTQ, the people in the LGBTQ plus community were addressed, or how their situations were addressed. We believe that our opening like touched on it, but they didn't give it the importance that it really needed, and we'll prove that in this in my speech, right? So first thing, let's understand that the people who were involved, or people who are involved in the this community, LGBT community, the people who suffered a lot, people who were having hate crimes being committed to them, people who were dying, people who had to like really fight for their lives in a lot of situations in this country. And these people are a huge minority that have suffered for a long time. Obama, in his tenure or in his like term as president, was one of the biggest advocates for the rights, for the support of the rights of these people, for the support of the freedoms of these people. So much so that there was serious development and significant like support for these people, to the point that they have reached a point where their suffering has been reduced significantly, right? You understand that this advocacy that Obama had was something that Romney Mitt Romney wouldn't really have brought to the country, as Obama was like one of the biggest advocates for these people's rights. So we are saying that what the progress that America made with Obama in terms of protecting these people who really had to suffer a lot of things being done to them, where most people had their lives even threatened and these kinds of things. We say that Obama's tenure has really protected the rights of these people, has really like ensured that they keep on getting that kind of protection for a longer period. We know that it's not like perfect with their situation at the moment, but Obama's tenure has made sure that they get a significant amount of protection and freedom. And what we also get from that is that Obama currently America is one of those people who really support these kinds of things, that they go to other countries and try to spread this kind of message to protect LGBT people in their countries, and believe that that is good. It has made America a leader in terms of like making sure they protect the rights of these people. And we see that Obama was a major like driving force for these for the protection of these kinds of people and the LGBT community and all of that. Okay, good. Next next argument, right? On why we prefer Obama to Mitt Romney, like in the elections, right? So greater political community. We are seeing that Obama, him being in the minority in the country, right, as a black person, firstly, and also not being like Mitt Romney, who was more like very insulting, especially in that his famous 47% comment, where he like really where he really like insulted the huge group of the population, which was 47% of the population, where he said that the people are poor and they are victims because they don't pay their taxes. So with that, we see that he wasn't as empathetic to people who suffer as much, right? And we believe that that would have really translated into his tenure as president, and we don't want that. Obama was more inclusive with the policies like Obamacare and all these things that have already been mentioned. We are saying that OG really brought up something to say that Obamacare had a lot of restrictions, and we say that is not the case. Before Obamacare, there was an already medical aid program that was already there, and it didn't cover a lot of people. It's covered like middle class people and like upper middle class people to the upper middle class people to the upper class people. They're saying that Obamacare really like expanded the coverage of healthcare to a lot of people who were in economically disadvantaged at the time. And we believe that this is very good, like in in the country that why the unity was super important that the place was something Obama really came to do a lot took place, right? When he was voted the first time in 2008, it was at the time that they were suffering with a huge financial crisis, and Obama helped a lot in trying to like fix that problem, and he like brought the economy back to a more steady position than it was at first. They're saying that this reason is something why Obama should have continued to like keep on winning and stay in power, because if he had showed great competence in terms of dealing with one of the biggest financial crises in the world, it's better to still keep him to make sure that he improves it. He made sure that people had more jobs and like more people to get more money in terms of employment and all these kinds of things. They're saying that he was very good in terms of handling the financial crisis, and also as an extension the rest of the world, because it wasn't only America that was suffering from it. Other people were also suffering. Other countries were also suffering from it. And Obama's reign made sure that the kind of comeback that America had in terms of like coming back from the crisis also extended to other countries. Yeah, good. On American foreign policy, right? We said that Obama's tenure made sure that he was very like basically Obama was very serious in trying to end the Iraq war, which was really like killing a lot of people and making sure a lot of people were disadvantaged and suffering. I believe that Obama did very well in terms of combating the problem in Iraq, and this was very good in terms of like foreign policy and all of that. Good. On uh yeah, on Trump is the more what really brought up earlier. Like, Trump is the more we'll say to that is that it would have still existed because there was really no alternative to rival the popularity of the Democrats in that sense. So basically, what we are saying is that we provide better material benefits to people, right? We said that Mitt Romney wasn't somebody who was so empathetic with people who were suffering a lot, people who had to depend on the government, as he had already showed in the interview that he did before with his insulting comments to the people who suffer a lot, blaming their victimhood on the fact that they don't pay taxes and like income taxes and the like. So we are saying that Obama, in his case, protected LGBT people, extended that protection to other parts of the world, and made sure that the financial crisis was really handled steadily. I believe that Obama's tenure would have been way better than anything Romney would have come to do because of like all the reasons I basically stated. OG tries to make the debate about Republicans versus Democrats. I believe it's more fair to make it Mitt Romney versus Obama, and this is how we like win the debate. Thank you very much. How to oppose.
Okay, thanks, member of all government whip. When we're ready. Yes, you can.
And I'll start shortly. Okay, cool. My name is Juhi. My pronouns are she, her. If you'd like to ask me a POI, preferably from opening, then you can. Just unmute yourself and ask. Great. I'm going to start in 3, 2, 1. On a base level panel, I can't do anything more, and I can't provide you with any more false statistics and facts to prove why voter in 2012 would have had a legitimate choice between Romney and Obama. The debate is quite simple, panel. What was better and what is a beneficial choice for a voter in 2012? Eli and I gave you 3 exclusive metrics. 1, they want security. They've just come out of an explosive financial crisis. 2, they want representation of their voices. 3, they don't want economic isolationism. They want the market to be as broad as possible in order to reap the most amount of benefit. I'm going to show you then why the Obama policy that he tried to implement, the one pumping all the state capital into social welfare, wasn't only not successful and is literally parallel to the way Argentina has failed, but secondly, that the US has made very harmful policies that could have avoided the extremity if it had been done in 2012 and not in 2024. The second thing that I need to clarify, panel, is just the difference between ideology here. Because the debate isn't necessarily about what Obama did and what Romney could have done. The debate is a literal debate about what ideology people wanted to buy into in 2012. Why is this specifically important? Because the presidential election was quite close. Romney won 47% of the votes. Obama, I believe, won 51%. That's not a very, very big margin. So clearly, both sides had something very beneficial to offer. What we actually need to show you in this debate is why Romney had something even more beneficial or slightly more beneficial